Well, Trent Baalke had a day, or did he? We'll dissect it here on Locked On Jaguars in just a moment.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every day. And we always thank you for making us your first listen. Quick to remind you that we are free on our YouTube page. All you got to do is just go to Locked On Jaguars on YouTube. Make sure you hit the like button, the bell, so you receive notifications. And then make sure you check in every day so you don't miss an episode in that location. Also, wherever you get your podcast, your audio podcast, make sure you tap in there every single day so you don't get left out and miss something that you're not supposed to miss too, and that is another episode of Locked On Jaguars. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. FanDuel. Make sure you visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. Shout out to the everydayers for joining us every single day. And you could be an everydayer too. All you got to do is, like I said, join us every single day. All right. So I got a guest. I got to bring him up here real quick. My man, Demetrius Harvey. That's right. The beat writer for Jacksonville.com and the Florida Times Union. My partner in crime. We've been on the phone this morning because he was picking at me. If you go on social media, you'll see that I'm accidentally being funny in an old man way these days, and Demetrius will always not spare his laughter at me. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. It was a funny morning.
Pretty funny, wasn't it? Pretty funny when I'm asking for the punchline, and the fact that I'm asking for the punchline was the punchline. Correct? Is that what it was?
That's pretty much it. The punchline was the punchline, and you
and I didn't get it. And I was like, well, you ain't telling me nothing. He was like, well, that's it. That's what I just told you is what it is. So anyway, just go on social media. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Demetrius, busy day in the NFL. We're going to focus on the Jacksonville Jaguars. First of all, Trent Baalke got busy, added a lot of people, a lot of excitement, even had me to the point where I was like, you know what, this ain't half bad, right? Give me your assessment of it before we actually start breaking up. First of all, we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about the good and the reality, and then what's next. We'll hit all of those on all 3 segments. So first of all, tell me how you feel about yesterday.
Yeah, just like I guess like my overall thoughts. Initially, they go out, they sign Gabe Davis. That's their first big time signing. I looked at it like, it's a solid pick. It's a solid pickup. It's a solid player. It just depends on what else they do. They have the Calvin Ridley deal. They're going to have to get that done. I really do think that him, Gabe, and Zay Jones are pretty redundant. Those are 2 guys that could play the same position basically. You're going to have to go out and get a Calvin Ridley. But, overall, I thought that yesterday was solid. I thought that Mitch Morse was probably their best signing. I know that wasn't technically a free agent, whatever signing, but it was. So he's probably the best player I thought out of all of them in terms of what's going to make them better. Darnell Savage, I kind of questioned a little bit. I thought he struggled with Green Bay as a safety. I don't know exactly how they're going to use him in Jacksonville. I'm assuming they're going to use him as a safety because can't imagine him as a nickel. Ronald Darby was another one of my favorite pickups. I thought, you have to be able to have that outside corner or a person who can potentially, fit inside too. He's a guy who's played a little bit of that. He hasn't played a lot, but he's played a little bit of that. He could. He's an outside guy, and I thought that was a good pickup. And then Duvernay, he's just a guy that they brought in to replace Jamal Agnew straight up. That's it. Jamal Agnew, he's been hurt a couple years during his 3 years here in Jacksonville. I think that they understand that they can upgrade with a younger guy, and maybe not upgrade, but at least side grade kind of with a younger guy, and that's pretty much it. And he did the Spider-Man meme post this morning, which it just makes sense. They're basically the same player. So Jamal's probably gone.
No doubt about it. So let me give you my initial assessment. I want to make sure I hit them all. Mitch Morse, I agree with you, was very, very necessary. You don't have to be a great center. You just have to be one that's good enough to not get knocked on your butt every other play and have the plays blow up in people's face. And I think Mitch Morse, you don't get to the point where he is right now for a team that was contending for a Super Bowl for the last couple of years without being that. Without question, he is the starter, and I think they're going to try to give Luke Fortner a chance to get it figured out. I'm actually impressed by that with Trent, and that's because that means that Trent, he ain't got no problem with admitting that he kind of made a mistake, and not really just a mistake in picking Fortner. I think I saw this somewhere that Creed Humphrey was chosen at the end of the second round, and Fortner was chosen at the top of the third, and their money isn't that far off. So when you think about it, it's like one of the best centers in the league and Luke Fortner almost making the same kind of money. You can't win that way. You cannot win that way. So good on him for going out, because we were listening to the same press conferences. It sounded like they were just going to run it back with Cool Hand Luke for a minute. And it was just like, well, no, you can't do that. So they do go get a veteran. Gabe Davis, he gives them something that I was always saying he gives them something they don't have, right? But then somebody said, no, he's Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram is that. Well, not quite. Gabe Davis gets down the field. I don't like the fact that he's about 50-50 on balls thrown his way. But he does give them something that they did not have, and he fills that room out. Darnell Savage, more activity on the back end. I think this is all about the pass game coordinator on defense, or this is about him needing bodies, active bodies with athleticism that he can work with. Ronald Darby fits that same description and also gives him that veteran presence and somebody that is well respected. And then Devin Duvernay. I like that upgrade too. And the reason why I call it an upgrade, because as explosive as Jamal Agnew was, one, he was injury prone. Two, he put the ball on the field in some real inopportune times. And then how many times you and I sat up in the press box and they called a play for him, and without it being his fault at all, because he's short, it was just overthrown or just out of his reach. And sometimes when he would jump up, it tip off and somebody pick it off. And we're like, can't even be mad at him, but it's just that Trevor had to make a better throw. And those are the things that bother me. So all in all, is it a good day? Anytime you can add players to your team that fit your scheme. And I think these guys match up very well to the scheme, by the way. I think that's a good thing. Now, for the rest of the story, that is sort of the good. I'm going to hit you with the reality. And yesterday I was super, super positive, and I was doing that on purpose, right? It was because it felt good to see the Jaguars have news and get players and do this and all of that stuff. But I got to really, really, really narrow this down and tell you exactly what it is. I'll start it with this, Demetrius. They spent less money on Gabe Davis than they did on Christian Kirk, and actually on a per year, probably Zay Jones, if you look at the guaranteed portion. They spent less money on Darnell Savage than they did on Rayshon Jenkins. They spent less money on Ronald Darby, obviously, than they did from Shaq Griffin. And they spent less money on Devin Duvernay than they initially did on Jamal Agnew. Now, folks will be like, well, they upgraded. I'm not talking about the cap hit. I'm talking about the initial contracts with those guys from 2 or 3 years ago, right? And it turns out that wasn't good enough to get them beyond 9 and 8 in 2 straight years. Well, now inflation's happened. Guys get more money, right? They're getting less money. So we have to make sure that we look at it for what it is. Bargains are one thing. If we're hungry and I want fast food and you're like, nope, I want a steak and potatoes, yours is going to cost more than mine. But at the end of the day, I can say, it ain't make me no difference. We're back on the road. We're both full. But football doesn't work that way. Games got to be played. And ain't nobody going to care that Robert Hunt got $100 million when he's pancaking the hell out of somebody.
Right.
We still got the same people, for the most part, doing the same things that they were going to do or they did last year, for regardless of the money. The money is part of the game right now, but money ain't gonna have nothing to do with it when they start lining up. So what I'm gonna do is hit you with a little bit of reality here in segment 2 on Locked On Jaguars, and I'm gonna get Demetrius's output. Also, he's the beat writer for the Times Union and Jacksonville.com. We're gonna do all that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. But first, I got to let you know about today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset on a 1 seed or it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook, right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can't even pick who's going to win it all. You can do that if you try, and you might be able to get it. And FanDuel will be right there and will pay you for it. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Now, these brackets are hard, man. Gone are the days where low seeds don't beat high seeds. Don't think that won't happen, right? Make sure you do your research, and FanDuel, this is just a platform for you to bet. You can do your research there as well. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. It's FanDuel. All right, second segment here on Locked On Jaguars. Day 2 of I'm glad they changed the name from the early tampering period or legal tampering, because that's an oxymoron. Mm-hmm. You can't legally do something illegal. So it's called the early negotiation period. Before we get to the Jaguars, did anything happen that shocked you or surprised you yesterday, Demetrius?
Shocking. Honestly, not really much. I guess the only thing that was a little bit surprising was how much money the running backs were getting. Yeah. Saquon, I think he got about $12 million per year, something like that. Just a little bit surprised by that movement. I thought that the running back market was going to be pretty much nothing. I think we just saw Derrick Henry sign with the Ravens, so it's kind of interesting to see the different running backs kind of changing places. And then obviously the guards, you were talking about it earlier, Robert Hunt making $80 million, or I just didn't expect it. $20 million per year, that's the same as Jawan Taylor last year. I just was not expecting that for a guard. I think it's sort of obviously desperation with teams, but also I think right now the league is sort of shifting again. And maybe, those running backs, that value might start going back up, because when defenses start getting smaller, eventually, teams are just going to start running the ball. So maybe that's part of it. But, I think those are the only surprising things, I think, around the league that I saw.
The analogy I use about the running backs and the running game is this. You remember in the NBA a few years back when Golden State was on their run, and then Houston loaded up with like Chris Paul, James Harden, Russell Westbrook. Who I don't know if all those guys were there together, but you know what I mean. When they had all of those dudes, right? And I'm thinking like, what y'all gonna y'all think y'all gonna out 3-point shoot Golden State?
Just gonna outscore them.
Yeah, I mean, why the hell would you they are so great with what they do? Why would you go and say, okay, we're gonna match that? You know how you beat it? You just become the polar opposite. And and you have the David versus Goliath, or you have the rain versus the sunshine. You don't try to out sunshine like the French Polynesia. You can't do it. You just can't. You can't beat them at what they do. You have to force them to do something else. So what's going to happen is eventually somebody's going to power up. I think it's going to be the Chargers, because Jim Harbaugh wants to do it anyway. Right. And Baltimore kind of already does it.
Greg Roman.
But I think, they're going to power up and they're going to say, okay, you with all that pretty stuff. What they're eventually going to do, Dan Campbell kind of does it a little bit too in Detroit. And it's like, once they put it all together, it's like y'all built, to look all pretty. We ain't pretty. We're going to get dirty. We're going to get muddy. We're going to drag you in this pig pen and whoop you. So I do think it's a copycat league. And sometimes too many of those teams, the only team like that has won has been the Rams. I keep saying that we're copying people that really have never won anything. And I'm talking about the Shanahan, thing. Everybody wants to be San Francisco, but San Francisco ain't won crap since 1994. So make sure before you start copying something that it actually wins, right? And when it comes to the Jaguars, we talked about the good. Here's the reality. The reality is just similar to last season. Last year, everybody was talking about an edge rusher. Remember? They still ain't addressed it. And you don't even hear nobody being upset. They haven't addressed the backup edge rusher yet, the edge rush depth. They still haven't. But this is what Trent, in my opinion, can do. It's almost as if so much has gone wrong here in the past that if you do anything that's positive, it cancels all the negative stuff.
Absolutely. It does. And it's a situation where like you said, he's done so much where the fans have gotten in the media. You know, we've all been confused and like, why are you doing this and what's that and ripping them. So yeah, when he does do something positive, like the Ronald Darby signing was a perfect example of that. I thought, you know, you saw, you know, everybody was kind of up in arms about Darnell Savage and they're kind of confused or whatever the case may be. Once Ronald Darby signed, they're like, hell yeah, good job, Trent. You know, so it's a situation where, you know, you just got to do one good thing. If you sign a pass rusher, like you said, it's all good. If you sign Calvin Ridley back, it's all good. All of a sudden, all of the bad or all of the negative things about what you might have seen during the first wave of free agency, all of that's gone. So you're right. I think that just one good move can shift a lot of the narrative, and I think that that's something that they didn't do a good job last year.
Well, one of the things that I gave myself a little pat on the back, and this is before free agency started. You know, everybody can say we want Chris Jones. Yeah, good luck. We want Danielle Hunter. Okay, that's easy scouting, right?
Christian Wilkins.
I said I wanted Robert Hunt and I wanted Dorrance Armstrong. They got huge money yesterday when nobody was even thinking about Robert Hunt and Dorrance Armstrong, right? They got paid. So let me go through these guys real quick. So I'm going to give you, we talked about the positives, you know, because even when I do my little scouting, I never pay attention to the negatives. I always pay attention to what a guy can do, not what he can't do, because coaches will, Bill Belichick said, I'm going to ask him to do something he can't do. I'm going to ask him to do what he can do, right? So we talked about the positives. Here's the negatives, and there's a downside to it. And it's not me being negative Nancy, but what it is you got them at a discount for a reason, right? Okay. Buffalo fans last year, Mitch Morse, that was not performance based. They have to, when you're a good team, they probably feel like they got a guy cheaper or who's younger right behind him, right? So it'd be similar to you letting Cam Robinson go because you got Walker Little sitting right there and he's ready to play and he's cheaper. That's similar to what it probably is. He has a 1-year deal that kind of looks like a 2-year deal. So that's like not a permanent fixture. Okay. Ronald Darby fits the scheme, is not a permanent fixture. He's just a better player for this scheme than Darius Williams was, right? Darnell Savage, you know what Green Bay wanted? They wanted a new safety. They didn't want to keep this
2 new safeties.
And they went and got Xavier McKinney. You see what I'm saying? To just put it in context from Jaguars, when you have a guy like that here, you want to keep him. You don't want to let him go, right? And for the price that they paid like double or triple for whatever he's making, that's what they're giving the other kid. All right. Because a long time ago, a guy who was a personnel person always told me this: if they're a free agent, you better ask yourself why. Buffalo, all last year. Remember Odell? Remember all of these receivers? And they were saying Buffalo needs a receiver. Buffalo, even in the middle of the run to the playoffs last year, people were saying they needed a receiver opposite Stephon Diggs. The receiver they had was Gabe Davis. All right. Duvernay, I can't find anything negative to say about it. I'm being honest with you. I can't. So it's not as if we're cherry picking. It's like the thing that I said yesterday is this all sounds good right now because he had bargains. But just like last year when edge rusher wasn't addressed, even though the two guys played well, it still hasn't been addressed. They said this because they said last year the pass rush had to be the most important thing. They said they weren't big and physical enough. The only big and physical thing they've done is get a center who's 32 years old. Still haven't addressed it, Demetrius.
Yeah.
Still haven't addressed big and physicality. The other thing is this. They signed 2 receivers, not including Calvin Ridley. They signed 2 receivers in a draft that's loaded with wide receivers. Like, why would you do that? It's something, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because this is what I said beforehand, where you have to look at draft and free agency. Whatever is not there, you can't force it. So receivers, offensive tackles, interior defensive tackles, and corners. The quietest positions yesterday were the ones I mentioned. The noisiest ones were interior offensive line, running back, and those other positions where in the draft they're weak.
Yep.
You notice that? Running back market is what it is because there ain't nothing in the draft that's going in the top 50 or 60. Yeah. Interior offensive line, it's okay, but once you get past that second round, it gets rough, right? And you notice that's where all the money went yesterday. Now, when you look at the draft boards, look at all of the players in the first round from wide receiver, tackle, corner. And then ask yourself this. Oh, and also defensive tackle, they got paid yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Defensive tackle is not strong in the draft. Why do you think teams do that? It's because you have to get what's available where it's at when it's available. The Jaguars did the total opposite. They signed 2 wide receivers in a year where the draft is chock full of them. And that, to me, says you ain't supposed to do that.
Yeah, no, it's exactly how you're not supposed to operate as a team. You're not supposed to put yourself in a position where you enter free agency and you're like, well, we have to sign Ronald Darby. We have to sign Darnell Savage because otherwise, what do we have? That's a situation that they found themselves in. We have to sign Gabe Davis because what if we don't get Calvin Ridley back? They don't want to enter the draft with just blanket holes, which makes sense. But at the same time, you don't want to have yourself in that position to be able to say all that. You don't see all these other teams. Even the Texans, they went out, they got Autry, they went out and they got Azeez Al-Shaair, a couple guys, and it's solid, right? But that's all they've done, and that's all they really need to do. They traded for Joe Mixon recently, but it's
didn't they get Foley? Didn't Foley go up there to help out a little bit for a year?
Foley signed too.
Foley and Autry, right? So that's a 290-pound defensive end who can slide inside. And then you got a 315-pound dude who you're not asking to be the savior the way the Jaguars. So I think it's perfect. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to finish this up. We're going to segment 3. That's a little bit of the reality. We'll talk more about the reality. We'll also talk about what's actually next. I told y'all, I said, Demetrius, I'm going to go here and I don't want to drag you into this and have people all in your mentions thinking you're being negative, but really it's not about being negative. It's just about being honest and being practical and getting the excitement up out of it. So we'll make sure that we tap in more. I got to let you guys know about tapping in somewhere else, and that's on Locked On, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. We're going to go through what is next. Is it something good? It's not bad, but we'll just have to wait and see what's going on as we look towards the draft. We'll get into that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by BetterHelp. If you've ever been in a situation where you needed therapy, you hopefully had a situation where it really, really has worked for you. BetterHelp has absolutely worked for me. Not only dealing with pain management, depth, getting older, not being myself, I find myself now running out of time. I don't have a lot of time to do the things that I want to do and the things that I need to do. And it's pretty much stressful trying to figure out where to start and where to finish every single day. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? BetterHelp gives you a chance through therapy to help you figure out how to work that 24 hours out to best benefit you. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. All right, third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars with Jacksonville Jaguars beat writer Demetrius Harvey, also my client, by the way. Yeah, we hang out at the barbershop and talk all that kind of noise, and then he comes on Twitter and picks at me because I'm getting old, but that's all good, right? Demetrius, what's next when you're looking forward to the draft, in your opinion? I got on my son yesterday. He said, well, I'm going to go get me a corner in round 1 or this in round 2. And I said, I taught you better than that. Now, you got to wait to see what's there. Don't be going talking about you just going to blindly go pick a position. But if you want to, Demetrius, you can blindly pick a position and tell me what's next for you when it turns the rest of free agency and what you think they're looking forward to in the draft.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and honestly, I think everybody obviously will think this too. Calvin Ridley, you're gonna have to go out. You have to re-sign him. I mean, the report came out, and I can actually confirm this too. Calvin wants to return to Jacksonville. He wants to be a Jaguar, and so there's nothing. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. it's one of the first times, and Wig, you might be able to tell me otherwise, but it feels like one of the first times a player of Calvin Ridley's caliber has said openly, basically openly, I want to be here. I want to be in Jacksonville. When's the last time a player who's about to enter free agency has said that?
I know why you're laughing, because you know where I'm going. Jalen Ramsey told me he wanted to be here, right? He just wanted to get paid, man. And when they say they weren't going to pay him, and then they yell at him because they tell him to be a leader, and then all of a sudden he's like, they ain't serious about winning. Now look, I told the guy the other day, dude, say all you do is say negative stuff about the Jaguars. Well, that means I'd be hitting 80% then over the last 20 years, because we ain't had a whole bunch of positive stuff to talk about. Jalen was kind of right. All the agony y'all been going through, Jalen wasn't wrong.
Listen, Jalen's a whole podcast episode. I've been wanting to talk about him for a while, but
and see, there's stuff people know and stuff stuff that people don't know. Like you're glad the people that were in charge got run out of town. You call Shad incompetent. How come the guy who works in the building can't say the same thing? I've never understood that for the life of me.
Listen, yeah, exactly. But the whole point is, the last person to want to do that, basically Jalen, you screwed that up. And so to me, this is an opportunity that you can't pass up on. They have to be able to beat out the Patriots. I mean, you got to think, the Patriots don't have a quarterback yet. They're completely rebuilding. Calvin's 29, about to be 30. Do you think he wants to go to New England to finish out, probably the best portion of his career? I doubt it. So, you got to get that done. And I think that's pretty much what they need to do in free agency. I mean, yeah, you got to go out and get an edge rusher. I like a guy like Josh Uche. I think they can get him pretty cheap, because last year wasn't necessarily his best season, most productive season. So you go out and get a guy like him. You go out and you get a guy maybe like a Sheldon Rankins. I'm not sure if he signed, but somebody to sort of come in and fill that role. Like you said, they preached bigger and stronger, and yet they've done. Mitch Morse, who's 32-year-old center, that's not necessarily getting it done in terms of bigger and stronger. I think they have to do a lot more. And then going toward the draft, I'm not going to pigeonhole myself into one position, but defensive line, cornerback, wide receiver. I still think that those are the three major, keys. Now, if they go out and they get a Calvin Ridley, I don't necessarily think that they have to get a wide receiver at 17 then, because at that point you have Gabe Davis, you have Christian Kirk, you have Calvin Ridley. Seems like it'll be pretty straight. Cornerback I still feel like is a pretty strong need, even with Darby. But then, after that, defensive line, it just feels like you said, there's not that many strong defensive linemen after the first round. So if you're gonna have that need, you might need to pick it at 17. So those are probably the three that I would go with.
Whoever they pick, and I'm always optimistic that Trent's gonna just pick real well. And I'm only that way because you know what the history is, but you just got to be optimistic about something sometimes. Just hope, right? Just have hope. The thing is I think about Les Snead. Kyron Williams was third in the league in rushing last year. Puka Nacua, if I'm not mistaken, led the league in receiving. You see where they got picked?
Yeah.
You see what they're paying them? Don't talk to me about bargains until your guys are some of the best players on your team. Unfortunately, before this all started, the best player on the team was Trevor and Josh and Trayvon and probably ETN, Oluwakan, and Ridley. Let's just say those six, right? I mean, it's arguable that you could argue somebody. Anton is 7. Anton Harrison, 7. All right. Those are still the top 7 players on your team, and you spent all that money yesterday. You didn't sign anybody that's going to change the top of your team. I think they injected a lot of stuff into the middle. And we just have to make sure that we understand that games still have to be played. The other thing that I believe is critical, the free agents that they signed 2 and 3 years ago, they're cycling them out. They don't have drafted replacements for them, which means cheaper work, right? They don't have a Puka Nacua. They don't have a Kyron. They don't have those dudes. So they have to go out and get them again in free agency. We have to make sure that that's not a repeat cycle. They have to make sure, rather. But we have to just be honest about what we see. This only works if in a year or two, when Morse is done, when Darby's done, on that third year of Savage's deal when he's likely done, when Kirk's deal is over and you're still here with Gabe Davis and his deal might get done after 2 years, right? Who are you going to have coming in for him? Or is this like the transfer portal? You just got to recycle it and go out and get a whole bunch of more guys again, and everything is done in 2 or 3 year cycles. Because if you're doing it like that, it's not going to be sustainable long term.
And that, yeah, exactly. That just doesn't work. The Rams did it the 1 year where they just brought in everybody. They already had a pretty, yeah, they went for it and it paid off. But look at them now. You know, they had a couple struggling years. Maybe they're back on the return. Obviously, they snuck into the playoffs. So it's a good situation to be in when you're a team that has those draft picks that can just recycle. The issue with the Jaguars is that they haven't had good drafts lately. So okay, perfect example here. They brought in Devin Duvernay. Why did they draft Parker Washington last year? It wasn't. I thought. That's my point. Parker Washington is a guy that's supposed to be able to replace replace Jamal Agnew. You're not supposed to have to pay for a Devin Duvernay. Now, are you going to get an All-Pro returner out of Parker? No, but you don't need an All-Pro return guy. That's a luxury. So to me, it's a situation where you're seeing it unfold in real time. They got rid of Rayshawn. They drafted Antonio Johnson last year. Maybe they only view him as a nickel now. But they didn't have an adequate replacement for him. They didn't have a replacement for Darius because Monteric Brown clearly isn't going to be the guy. It's going to be Ronald Darby. So their draft picks are not getting in these positions. The wide receivers, Parker and then Elijah Cooks. They haven't drafted too many receivers, so they can't replace them with guys already on the roster. That's going to come out in the linebacker group. That's going to come out in the defensive line group for sure. That's already happening. Offensive line group, that's going to come out. The point is they haven't drafted well enough to be able to sort of just easily handle free agency, say, all right, we're going to supplement instead of, hey, we have to fill these holes right now.
You're right. More holes will be filled today. I'm going to continue this discussion all week. Me and Demetrius can do this all day, but then I get in trouble. So that concludes this episode of Locked On Jaguars. Make sure you tap in every single day because it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. Demetrius can be found on X at Demetrius82. It's just like it's spelled. Okay, but the last 2 numbers is an 8 and a 2. It's not really 82. Don't spell that out. And of course, I'm Shop Talking Wig. I can be found on X as well. Until next time, you guys take care. We'll see you here on Locked On Jaguars.